Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Ben the Pen Man, where today I've got something pretty cool to show you guys. I have finished my entry to the Pokemon TCG Illustration Contest of 2022, and I just wanted to make this video to show you guys how I did it. But first thing, before we do anything else, I just want to remind everyone that if you plan on entering this, it ends January 31st, 2022 at 6:59 a.m. Pacific time. So this is not like till midnight on January 31st. So don't make the same mistake I did when I did the Clash of Clans base design contest, making a home base. I made the mistake of thinking it was due midnight the day it was due, and I actually finished it before the deadline, but I thought I had more time so that I could upload a YouTube video, and I just... So don't do that, but I'm going to talk to you guys about this contest really quick. So basically the idea is you want to design the art for a Pokemon card, and I'm just going to go into this entry form because it has pretty cool stuff. So the grand prize and the first runner-ups will get turned into a promo card, and obviously you'll get some cash prizes. $500 for the 15 judge awards. 2 second runners-up will get $1,000. 2 first runners-up will get $3,000, and the grand prize will get $5,000. But the grand prize winner and the first runner-up, one from Japan and one from the United States. So yeah, that's the thing. It will be made into an actual promo card. So I thought that was amazing. The theme was the daily life of Pokemon. So it wasn't necessarily about battling. It was about, what do they do on the day-to-day basis? And these are the 8 options they gave me. And so while I was planning out, which ones was I going to do, I basically had to kind of make the decision of 3 to pick, because I don't remember where it says it, but you can only do 3 entries. And they could have been the same Pokemon. I just wanted to do something a little more unique. So when I was deciding, I kind of decided Cramorant isn't exactly my cup of tea. He's not really my favorite Pokemon. Charizard and Pikachu are just a little bit too mainstream for me, so they were also kind of out. I had a fun idea for Galarian Rapidash. I don't know if you've ever seen Gravity Falls. There's an episode with a unicorn, and there's a moment where it's like in front of a rainbow, making a really dopey face. And I was thinking it would be really funny to make a Galarian Rapidash in the same kind of style and pose. But I decided, I don't think they really wanted to deal with Disney lawyers. So I also probably didn't really like changing styles that much. So I figured that probably wasn't a good idea, and so I was kind of left with Arcanine, Greninja, Scizor, and Bulbasaur. I ended up going with Bulbasaur, Scizor, and Greninja. My original plan was Bulbasaur, Scizor, and Arcanine, but I just couldn't think of anything good for Arcanine. I actually came up with something really cool for Greninja. But anyway, right now I'm going to switch over to showing you guys how I made the entries for Greninja, Scizor, and Bulbasaur, and show you guys the final thing that I submitted, and yeah, let's get into it. Alright, so as you guys can see, I started out with sketching. That's always what you should do when you're trying to make a really nice art piece. And as you see this Greninja here, I'm actually going to end up scanning it and using it to make my digital piece, whereas this Scizor I actually never ended up using. You'll see what I did for Scizor in a second. But this Bulbasaur was just a planning piece, because my plan with Bulbasaur has always just kind of been to do a traditional watercolor piece and pretty much do it all physically and then just scan it and submit it, because the submission does have to be digital. But yeah, so we'll get into the Bulbasaur. For Bulbasaur, I started with that little sketch on the watercolor paper, and then I took the paint, I got it wet, and I just started putting in a little bit of color. Something that I've been pretty bad at in the past is starting off with darker colors when I'm watercolor painting. That's really not something you should do, and it's something I've been trying to get better at. So I decided I would start out with really, really wet, really, really light colors. And that's the thing with watercolors. You don't actually mix white paint in there. You just put a lot of water in there, and then it'll come off as a really light color, and that's the best way to do it, since you're working with a white piece of paper. But yeah, that's kind of how you do it, is you start with really, really light, and then you slowly make darker regions. And you'll see me go along doing that as we go. Alright, so next you can see me putting in the outlines. Now normally I would do this with a black pen or marker, but I actually thought I would try something different this time. And I'm actually using watercolor pens. And these are just like, they have like preset colors, and then you just wet them and you put them on as if it's watercolor. But it's like a pen. So I decided I would try and use those because I kind of didn't like the idea of having just like pure black lines. That just kind of felt too harsh for me, trying to make it feel more like ethereal, like Bulbasaur is in a pretty forest. So I decided to use those pens. The outlines turned out a little bit thicker than I wanted for the most part, especially around the leaves and kind of the bottom half of the piece. But overall, I think it turned out pretty well. And here you can see I'm kind of deviating from what you would normally do in a watercolor piece, and I'm doing it by pulling out some colored pencils and some Posca paint markers. So the thing about the colored pencils is I don't know if they really did as much. I'm really kind of out of practice using colored pencils. When I was a kid I would always use them, but ever since I I don't know, there was just a point where I just kind of stopped using them, and I think it's just because I'm not very good at layering them on right, so that I can make really solid colors. It's definitely a skill I need to work on. So I feel like the colored pencils, one place where I feel like they really helped is that little flabebe in the corner. I just couldn't get precise enough to shade that and give it value in a way that just felt right. But then I pulled out the colored pencils and I felt like I could really control it a little bit better. So that kind of helped, but actually most of that got cut off in the final scan just because I had to make it fit certain dimensions. So that's disappointing. But the one that really made a huge difference were those Posca paint markers. They are really, really good at going over an area and lightening it. You take the white and the yellow. I even used some pink around that pink mushroom thing in the corner. And they really did a good job at just like allowing me to make smaller, more precise areas of highlight, which is something that's really hard to do in watercolor, like I was saying before. And I think it turned out really well. I'm really, really glad with the way this Bulbasaur turned out. And yeah, there you go. There's the Bulbasaur. So, next in line, we have Scizor. And as I said before, I had that sketch, but I actually ended up not using it. And that was because one day I was just kind of sketching and drawing with this black little, what is it called? A brush marker? And I was just drawing something. And it actually turned out pretty nice, and I was like, you know what? I don't really have a lot of time left. I was kind of running out of time. It was near the end of the month. I was like, you know, I think I can turn this into a good illustration for the Scizor card. And as you can see here, I'm pulling it up, and I'm just taking out all the white, since it was just black and white when I did it physically. And then I'm going to put in the color. So something you'll notice about the 3 entries I did is they're all actually going to end up being almost entirely different in process and in final feel. The Bulbasaur was almost all physical. I did do a little bit of airbrushing at the end, which I don't know if it actually really even changed it much, but I was just like, let's airbrush this, make sure, you know. And then the Scizor was done, all of the black and the outlines and stuff was done physically, and then I scanned it and I colored it digitally, whereas the Greninja was almost all digital. I just did the sketch physically. And so that you'll go seeing those as we go along. But here we have the Scizor, and it was really a pretty simple job. All I needed to do was block out Scizor's colors and put the colors in the sky, put the colors on the building that he was standing on, and from there it was just about kind of airbrushing. I did do a little bit of highlights with just like a white pen tool, and I just kind of went along trying to strengthen those edges where we didn't have any black outlines. Since the black outlines were all pretty they weren't like super like sharp or detailed. They were all just kind of done. I when I was doing it, I wasn't expecting this to be my final one, but as I went along, I was like, hey, I can probably turn this into something cool, and I don't really have time to do anything else. So yeah, and there you can just see me putting in the colors, airbrushing it to try to get those different highlights, and that is Scizor for you. Alright, next in line we have Greninja. And so Greninja is done all digitally, except for the sketch that I did. I scanned it, I brought it into Krita, and now I'm just using it to make my piece, so I didn't have to sketch on the computer. I actually really don't like doing my sketches in the digital program. I don't know why. It just feels better on a paper. I don't really know the answer to why, but that's just what I decided to do. So here you can see I'm using a blue pen to do the outlines. It just makes it easier to see what's supposed to be an outline and what's part of the sketch. And I can just change the color of the whole layer afterwards, and it'll change the actual color of the outlines so that they can be darker black like they normally are in an outline. But yeah, so here I'm just setting up that. You'll see me use some circle tools for things like the moon and for the clock tower's clock. And yeah, so you'll just see me doing all of that. And here you can see I skipped quite a lot. That wasn't on purpose. I was just trying to do a little bit of like, my thought was like, oh yeah, in the video I'll just skip forward and I'll say, oh yeah, so here you can see I blocked all the colors out and maybe did a really basic background off camera, and I just colored so much of it. I just did a lot of shading and highlighting, and I was like, wait a second. I was like starting to do the water droplets on the front, and I was like, hold on a second. I at least need to film this part. And so you'll see me putting the little water droplets in the front. When it came to blocking out the colors, I just took the colors, made them look as much as I can like an original, and then I just took an airbrush and some highlights with like a very light pen tool, and I just started doing those highlights around the edges to make it look like he's kind of facing away from the moon. And the clock tower. Those are the two big sources of light, is the moon and the clock tower. So I was making it look like he was facing away so we could only see his shadowed face. And then the highlights around the edge would just like show the light. And I think it turned out pretty cool. But as you can see, I also decided I wanted to really kind of bring home the dark and water and make it rain. And to do that, I decided, wouldn't it be cool if there was like water droplets on like the screen. And so I did it, and it's kind of interesting. I think a lot of the water droplets are in like shapes they wouldn't normally be in. I'll be honest. But I do think it actually looked pretty cool. In the end, I think this Greninja is the one that looks most professional, and I feel like if any of them have a good chance of winning, it's probably the Greninja piece. But as you can see, I go in, I make all those water droplets. I use white or like yellow white because the light is all yellow. The shadows are mostly like blue, and so I like to use those colors just to kind of make it feel like they're part of the scene. Something else you'll see me doing is I was making the water droplets opaque, and opaqueness is not something that water is. So I decided to like try and make them transparent, or maybe try blurring them, and I actually found that if I copied the same thing, transparent, and then I blurred it, but then I put another layer of the same thing over top that wasn't blurred, it actually kind of gave it kind of a glowy feel, and I really liked that. So that's what I ended up keeping. I also like to blur the rain, which I put down as just like very, very thin lines of like dark and light color. Then I just kind of blurred it a little bit, and you'll see me playing around with that. But that's kind of what I did for the rain. And yeah, then you'll probably see that the thing that took me the longest to get to was the clock tower, just doing all of the shading on it. But overall, I think it turned out really great. And yeah, that is my process behind the Greninja. And there you have them, my 3 entries to the Pokemon Illustration Contest. I made a couple of tweaks off camera. The biggest one is probably that I made Greninja a lot bigger because I realized that it was just too small in the frame. And most Pokemon cards have, like, the Pokemon is very, very big in comparison to everything else, like, zoomed in on them. And that's just because, you know, it's a small card and the picture is, like, less than half of the card. But yeah, so those are my 3 entries. I really hoped you enjoyed. If you are entering the illustration contest, just another quick reminder, do it before 7 a.m. Pacific time on the 31st. So that means you need to get it done before the 31st, which is a Monday. So before then, or you need to wake up really, really early so that you can get it submitted. But either way, that's going to be all I have for today. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Subscribe and like and all those YouTube things if you want to support me. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye.